Dr. Veltar pressed his three-fingered hand against the control panel of his ship. The blue lights blinked softly in the darkness of space. He had been traveling for many days to reach this small yellow star. The Corvani Council had given him a simple job: study the primitive life forms on the third planet and write a report. The ship's computer showed him images of the planet below. It was mostly blue water with brown and green land. White clouds moved slowly across its surface. Veltar had studied many worlds before, but this one looked different somehow. The computer told him that the dominant species called their world Earth and called themselves humans. Veltar made his ship invisible and moved closer to the planet. His people had technology that was thousands of years ahead of these humans. They could hide their ships, travel between stars, and live for hundreds of years. The humans, according to his data, lived for less than 100 years and had never left their own star system. The reason for his study was simple but urgent. The Dracoth hegemony was expanding across the galaxy. They were a cruel race that destroyed other species and took their planets. The Corvani Council wanted to understand how primitive species behaved so they could predict what the Dracoth might do when they found them. Every piece of information could help the Corvani prepare for war. Veltar chose to study a small human research station in the coldest part of Earth. The place was covered in ice and snow all year long. The humans there worked in terrible conditions, far from their homes and families. Veltar thought this would show him how humans acted when they were stressed and alone. He watched Dr. Hyunwoo Kim, who seemed to be the leader of the station. Hyunwoo was studying the ice and weather patterns. He was a tall man with dark hair who always looked serious. Every morning he would check on all the other humans at the station. He made sure they had enough food and that their equipment was working. Dr. So Young Park worked with Hyunwoo. She spent her time looking at tiny life forms that lived in the ice. Veltar could not understand why she cared about such small, useless creatures. In Corvani society, only things that helped the Empire mattered. These microscopic beings had no value at all. As Veltar watched, he began to see strange behaviors. When one human got sick, the others would take care of him, even though it meant extra work for everyone. When their communication equipment broke, they worked together for days to fix it instead of calling for help. Most strange of all, they seemed to enjoy each other's company even in such a harsh place. One day, a terrible storm hit the station. The wind was so strong it could knock down buildings. Snow fell so thick that Veltar could barely see the station through his advanced sensors. Any logical species would stay inside and wait for the storm to pass. But Hyunwoo noticed that one of his team members, a young scientist named Taiho, had not returned from checking some equipment outside. Veltar watched in amazement as Hyunwoo put on thick clothes and went out into the deadly storm. The wind was strong enough to freeze a Corvani in minutes, but the human kept walking. So Young tried to stop him, saying it was too dangerous. But Hyunwoo just smiled and said he would be back soon. For 3 hours, Hyunwoo searched in the storm. His body temperature dropped dangerously low. Ice formed on his protective clothing. Any reasonable person would have given up. But he kept looking until he found Taeho trapped under some fallen equipment. Hyunwoo freed him and carried him back to the station, both of them nearly frozen. Veltar recorded everything in his files. This behavior made no sense to him. Hyunwoo had risked his own life for another human. In Corvani society, individuals were important only for what they could do for the Empire. Personal bonds were considered a weakness that made people act foolishly, but the humans did not see it as foolish. When Hyunwoo returned with Taeho, the entire station celebrated. So Young hugged both men and cried with happiness. The other team members prepared hot food and drinks. They treated Hyunwoo like a hero, even though he had simply done what any of them would have done. As weeks passed, Veltar saw more examples of this strange behavior. The humans shared their food equally even when supplies were low. They took turns doing the worst jobs. They told stories and jokes to keep each other happy during the long, dark winter. Most puzzling of all, they often talked about their families back home and how much they missed them. Veltar tried to understand this through Corvani logic. Perhaps the humans formed these bonds because they were weak individually. Maybe their short lives made them desperate for connections, or possibly their primitive brains could not process information logically like more advanced species. His reports to the Corvani Council described humans as an emotional, illogical species driven by feelings instead of reason. They were physically weak, technologically backward, and spent too much energy on meaningless relationships. Veltar predicted that any advanced species like the Dracoth would easily conquer them. But deep in his research notes, Veltar recorded something else. Despite all their apparent weaknesses, the humans at the station accomplished amazing things. They survived in conditions that would kill most species. They solved complex problems with limited resources. And they did it all while maintaining their strange bonds with each other. As Veltar prepared his monthly report, his long-range sensors detected something that made his blood run cold. Dracoth scout ships were moving toward this sector of the galaxy. They were still far away, but at their current speed they would reach Earth in less than a year. The humans had no idea that death was coming for them. They continued their research, told their jokes, and took care of each other. Veltar looked at his data about their primitive weapons and weak military forces. According to every logical analysis, they had no chance of survival. He sealed his report and sent it to the Corvani Council. But as he watched Hyunwoo and So Young working together in their laboratory, laughing about something he could not understand, Veltar felt something strange. For the first time in his long life, he hoped his logical predictions were wrong. Veltar expanded his study beyond the ice station. He sent small invisible drones to different parts of Earth to watch more humans. What he found confused him even more than his first observations. The strange behaviors he had seen at the research station were not unusual at all. They were normal for humans everywhere. In a large city, he watched Jin-Ho Lee, a man who worked as a rescue worker. When buildings collapsed or fires started, Jin-Ho would run toward the danger while everyone else ran away. Veltar recorded dozens of times when Jin-Ho risked his life to save complete strangers. These were not people from his family or his tribe. They were just other humans who needed help. One night, Jin-Ho received a call about people trapped in a burning building. The fire was spreading fast and the building could collapse at any moment. Jin-Ho's team told him it was too dangerous to go inside, but he went anyway, climbing through smoke and flames to reach 3 children on the top floor. He carried them out one by one, even after part of the ceiling fell and injured his arm. When Jin-Ho returned home that night, his wife Soo-Jin worried about his injuries. She asked him why he always took such risks for strangers. Jin-Ho just smiled and said, "Because they are people, just like us. Their lives matter too." Veltar played this recording many times, trying to understand the logic behind it. He found none. In another part of the world, Veltar observed Haewon Choi, a teacher working in an area damaged by war. The school had no heat, few books, and barely enough food for the children. Haewon could have taken a better job in a safe, wealthy city. But she stayed to teach children whose parents had been killed or who had lost their homes. Veltar watched Haewon give her own food to hungry students. She used her own money to buy school supplies. When the building's roof leaked during rainstorms, she would hold buckets to catch the water while still teaching her lessons. The children loved her, and she treated each one like they were her own family. The Corvani scientist tried to find a logical reason for Haewon's behavior. Perhaps she was paid extra money for working in such a difficult place. But his research showed she actually earned less money than teachers in better schools. Maybe her government forced her to work there. But the records showed she had volunteered for the position and refused multiple offers to transfer to easier jobs. Veltar began studying human communication networks to understand their thoughts better. He used advanced translation technology to read their books, watch their entertainment, and listen to their conversations. What he found there puzzled him most of all. Humans told stories about heroes who sacrificed everything for others. They created art about love, friendship, and hope. They wrote songs about standing together against impossible odds. Most strangely, they seemed to believe that some things were more important than staying alive. They had concepts like honor, justice, and freedom that they valued more than their own safety. The concept of hope particularly confused Veltar. Humans would work toward goals they might never achieve. They would fight against problems that seemed impossible to solve. They would keep trying even when logic said they should give up. In Corvani society, such behavior would be considered a mental illness. Veltar studied human history and found the same patterns repeating over thousands of years. Small groups of humans would face much larger enemies and somehow find ways to win. They would survive disasters that should have destroyed them. They would rebuild their cities after wars and keep moving forward no matter what happened to them. He watched Min Seo-yoon, a diplomat who spent her days trying to prevent a war between two human nations. Both sides had good reasons to fight. They had old hatreds and competing interests. Most species would have simply chosen the stronger side or stayed away from the conflict entirely. But Mincio met with leaders from both nations day after day, trying to find a solution that would save lives. The negotiations were failing. The armies were preparing for battle. Everyone told Mincio that war was inevitable and that she was wasting her time. But she kept working, sleeping only a few hours each night, refusing to give up even when death threats were made against her. She truly believed that peace was possible if she just worked hard enough. Veltar began to realize that humans were more complex than any species he had studied before. They seemed weak when looked at individually. Their bodies were fragile, their lives were short, and they often made decisions based on emotions rather than logic. But when they worked together, they became something different, something stronger. He observed how humans formed groups that were larger than their biological families. They created communities, nations, and organizations based on shared ideas rather than blood relationships. A human could feel loyalty to millions of other humans they had never met, simply because they lived in the same country or believed in the same principles. This confused Veltar because Corvani society was based on logical hierarchies. Each individual had a specific role based on their abilities and genetic class. Personal feelings were considered irrelevant. The good of the empire was the only thing that mattered. But humans seemed to care about individuals just as much as they cared about their groups. As his research continued, Veltar noticed something else. Human technology was advancing faster than his initial calculations had predicted, not because they were individually smarter than other species, but because they shared knowledge freely. Scientists from different nations worked together on projects. They published their discoveries for everyone to read. They built on each other's work instead of keeping secrets. The approaching Dracoth ships were still months away, but Veltar found himself thinking about them more often. The Dracoth were everything that logic said should make them superior to humans. They were physically stronger, technologically advanced, and perfectly organized for war. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved many species. But as Veltar watched humans going about their daily lives, Jinho saving strangers, Hei-Wan teaching children, Mincio working for peace, he began to wonder if his logical analysis was missing something important. The Dracoth were strong, but they fought only for conquest and resources. Humans seemed willing to fight for things that could not be measured or weighed. Veltar's monthly reports to the Corvani Council remained focused on human weaknesses and primitive technology. But his private research files grew thick with observations that did not fit into logical categories. He recorded acts of kindness between strangers, artistic creations that served no practical purpose, and scientific discoveries made simply out of curiosity about the universe. Most puzzling of all, he found himself looking forward to his daily observations of the humans. Their behaviors might be illogical, but they were never boring. Each day brought new examples of them doing things that surprised him. And slowly, without quite realizing it, Veltar began to hope that somehow these strange, wonderful, impossible creatures might find a way to survive what was coming for them. The day Veltar had been dreading finally arrived. His long-range sensors detected 3 Dracoth scout ships entering the outer edge of the solar system. They moved slowly, scanning each planet as they approached Earth. Veltar knew their methods well. They would study the planet's defenses, count the population, and report back to the main fleet. Within weeks, hundreds of Dracoth warships would arrive to harvest Earth's resources and eliminate its people. Veltar stared at his sensor readings for a long time. According to every calculation, every piece of data he had collected, humanity had no chance of survival. The Dracoth ships were powered by technology that humans would not develop for centuries. Their weapons could destroy cities from space. Their armor could withstand any attack that human military forces could mount. But Veltar found himself thinking about Hyun-Woo walking into that deadly storm to save Taeho. He remembered Jinho running into burning buildings for strangers. He thought about Hei-Wan choosing to stay with her students in a war zone. These humans did impossible things every day, simply because they believed those things were right. For the first time in his career, Veltar decided to break the most important rule of his people. He would interfere with a primitive species. He piloted his ship down through Earth's atmosphere, keeping it cloaked until he reached the Antarctic Research Station. It was early morning, and most of the humans were still sleeping. Veltar materialized his ship outside the main building and disabled the cloaking device. Then he waited. Hyun-woo was the first to notice the strange silver object that had appeared overnight. He woke So-young and called the rest of his team. They gathered outside the building, pointing at Veltar's ship and talking in excited voices. Some of them looked scared, but none of them ran away. Veltar opened his ship's communication system and spoke to them in their language. "Dr. Kim, Dr. Park, I need to speak with you. I am not here to harm you. I have important information about a threat to your world." Hyun-woo stepped forward, even though his hands were shaking slightly. "Who are you? Where did you come from?" "My name is Dr. Veltar. I am from a star system far from here. I have been studying your species for several months. Please, may I come out and speak with you? Time is very short." So-young whispered something to Hyun-woo, who nodded. "Come out slowly," Hyun-woo called. "We want to see you." Veltar activated his environmental suit and stepped out of his ship. The humans gasped when they saw him. He was taller than them, with blue-gray skin and large, dark eyes. His hands had 3 fingers instead of 5, and he moved differently than they did, but he kept his movements slow and non-threatening. "You are an alien," So-young said, her voice filled with wonder instead of fear. "You are really an alien. This is the most amazing day of my life." Veltar was surprised by her reaction. "You are not afraid?" "Of course we are afraid," Hyun-woo said. "But we are also curious. Why are you here? What is this threat you mentioned?" Veltar explained about the Dracoth, their history of conquest, and the scout ships that were already in their solar system. He told them about the main fleet that would arrive soon, and what would happen to Earth when it did. The humans listened in silence, their faces growing more serious with each word. When he finished, Tae-ho asked, "How long do we have?" "Perhaps 6 weeks before the main fleet arrives. The Dracoth will demand your surrender. When you refuse, they will begin destroying your cities from orbit." "When we refuse," So-young said. "You think we will refuse?" Veltar looked confused. "Of course you will refuse. Humans do not surrender even when it is logical to do so. I have observed this pattern in all my studies." Hyun-woo smiled grimly. "You have been watching us for a long time, haven't you?" "Yes. The Corvani Council sent me to study your species before the Dracoth arrived. We wanted to understand how primitive civilizations behave in their final days." "Primitive," So-young repeated. "Is that what you think we are?" Veltar hesitated. A few months ago he would have answered yes immediately, but now after watching these humans risk everything for each other, he was not sure. "Your technology is primitive compared to ours, but your other qualities are more complex than I expected." Within hours, Hyun-woo had contacted his government. Emergency meetings were called in every major nation on Earth. Presidents, prime ministers, and military leaders gathered to hear Veltar's warning. Many of them did not believe him at first, but when he showed them images of the Dracoth ships and demonstrated his advanced technology, they had to accept the truth. The reaction was exactly what Veltar had predicted. Not a single nation suggested surrender. Instead, they began planning to fight back. General Eugene Kang, a military strategist, studied the information Veltar provided about Dracoth weapons and armor. "Their shields can deflect most energy weapons," she said. "But what about kinetic attacks? What about ramming them with our own ships?" Admiral Dong-hyun Jang looked at the orbital mechanics. "If we can get close enough, our nuclear weapons might damage their hulls. But getting close enough will be almost impossible." Yoon Ji-nam, a brilliant engineer, was already sketching modifications to existing spacecraft. "We can retrofit our space stations with weapons, turn communication satellites into guided missiles, use everything we have." Veltar watched these discussions with growing amazement. These humans were facing an enemy with technology thousands of years beyond their own, and their first instinct was to find ways to fight. They did not waste time on fear or despair. They immediately began working on solutions. Taemin-oh, a military tactician, asked Veltar detailed questions about Dracoth battle strategies. "They have superior firepower, but do they adapt quickly to new tactics? How do they respond to unexpected attacks?" "The Dracoth are very efficient," Veltar answered, "but they follow standard procedures. They have conquered so many worlds that they expect certain patterns of behavior." "Good," Taemin said. "Then we will give them something they do not expect." As days passed, Veltar found himself drawn deeper into human preparations. He provided technical specifications, tactical advice, and strategic intelligence. He told himself he was simply continuing his research, observing how humans behaved under extreme stress. But the truth was simpler than that. He wanted them to survive. The Dracoth scout ships moved closer to Earth, scanning for defenses and cataloging resources. They sent messages toward their home territory, calling for the main fleet. Veltar intercepted these communications and shared them with human military leaders. "They think we will be easy to defeat," Admiral Jang said after reading the Dracoth reports. "They are planning a simple harvest operation, not a real battle." "That gives us an advantage," General Kang added. "They will not be prepared for serious resistance." Veltar looked around the room at these humans making their impossible plans. According to all logic, they should be using their remaining time to say goodbye to their families and prepare for death. Instead, they were calculating weapons trajectories and discussing supply lines. For the first time since arriving at Earth, Veltar allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, these amazing creatures might find a way to win. The Dracoth warships arrived exactly when Veltar predicted they would. 3 massive vessels, each one larger than a human city, descended through Earth's atmosphere like dark clouds. Their hulls were black metal covered with weapon ports and shield generators. They moved slowly, confidently, knowing that no primitive species had ever successfully resisted them. Warlord Kethmar, commander of the Dracoth fleet, sent his standard ultimatum to Earth's governments. The message was broadcast on every communication channel across the planet. His voice was cold and mechanical as he spoke. "Primitive species of the 3rd planet, you will surrender all resources immediately. Your population will be relocated to processing centers. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your world. You have 1 rotation of your planet to comply." The response came not from Earth's leaders but from every radio, television, and internet connection on the planet. Millions of human voices spoke at the same time, in hundreds of different languages, but they all said the same thing. No. Veltar watched from his ship, hidden in orbit around Earth's moon. He had wanted to stay closer to monitor the battle, but the humans had insisted he remain at a safe distance. "If we lose," Admiral Jang had told him, "someone needs to survive to tell other species what happened here." The Dracoth response was swift and brutal. Energy beams lanced down from their ships, targeting major cities. But the beams struck empty air where the cities should have been. The humans had activated massive holographic projectors, making their populated areas appear to be several kilometers away from their actual locations. As the Dracoth weapons fired at false targets, human forces launched their counterattack. Modified communication satellites equipped with nuclear warheads changed course and dove toward the Dracoth ships. Most were destroyed by defensive fire, but 3 managed to reach their targets and exploded against the enemy shields. The explosions did no real damage, but they surprised the Dracoth. No primitive species had ever attacked them on the first day of conquest. Warlord Kethmar ordered his ships to adjust their scanning frequencies to penetrate the human deceptions. But the humans were ready for this too. As soon as the Dracoth began more detailed scans, Jun Seo Lim led a fleet of civilian spacecraft in a desperate charge toward the largest enemy ship. Cargo haulers, scientific vessels, and even passenger transports had been loaded with explosives and guided toward the Dracoth formation. Veltar watched in horror and admiration as these brave humans piloted their ships directly into enemy fire. Most were destroyed before reaching their targets, but their sacrifice created chaos in the Dracoth defensive patterns. In that moment of confusion, Sumin Han activated a computer virus that had been hidden in Earth's communication networks. The virus was designed using Veltar's knowledge of Dracoth technology. It infected their scanning systems and fed false information to their targeting computers. For several precious minutes, the Dracoth could not tell where human forces actually were. General Kang used those minutes well. Hidden missile batteries on Earth's surface launched thousands of projectiles at the Dracoth ships. These were not advanced weapons, just simple rockets with nuclear warheads. But there were so many of them that the enemy defensive systems could not stop them all. The first Dracoth ship shuddered under multiple impacts. Its shields flickered and failed in several sections. Through the gaps in their protection, human weapons found weak points in the alien hull. Explosions blossomed across the ship's surface as critical systems were damaged. But the Dracoth were far from defeated. The remaining two ships focused their fire on Earth's surface, trying to eliminate the missile bases. Cities burned as energy beams cut through the planet's defenses. Millions of humans died in the first hour of battle. Veltar received an emergency transmission from Hyunwoo, who was coordinating civilian evacuations in a burning city. "Veltar, we need your help. Can your ship's weapons damage their shields?" "My ship is designed for research, not combat," Veltar replied. "But I might be able to disrupt their shield frequencies temporarily." "That might be enough. We have one more plan, but we need a clear shot at their main ship." Veltar hesitated. If he attacked the Draketh directly, he would be breaking every law of his people. The Corvani Council would consider him a traitor. He would never be able to return home. But as he watched human cities burning below, he thought about all the things he had observed during his months of study. He remembered Hyunwoo walking into that deadly storm. He thought about Jinho saving strangers from burning buildings. He recalled Haewon staying with her students despite the danger. These humans had taught him something his own logical society had never understood. Sometimes the right choice was not the logical choice. Veltar activated his ship's weapons and dove toward the Draketh formation. His energy beams were not powerful enough to damage their hulls, but they disrupted the shield generators on the largest ship. For just a few seconds, a section of the enemy vessel was unprotected. In that moment, something incredible happened. Woojin Park, piloting a spacecraft loaded with every nuclear weapon the humans could find, flew his ship directly into the gap Veltar had created. The explosion was visible from space as Park's sacrifice tore a massive hole in the Draketh warship. The damaged ship began to fall toward Earth's surface, its engines failing. But even as it died, the remaining Draketh ships continued their attack. Warlord Kethmar was furious that primitives had damaged his fleet. He ordered his forces to destroy every human city, regardless of resource value. On Earth's surface, Ye-Eun Kim led a ground assault team toward a Draketh landing site. Her mission was impossible: capture enemy equipment that could be used to coordinate the final human attack. She knew she would not survive, but she also knew her sacrifice might save millions of others. Veltar watched helplessly as Ye-Eun's team fought their way through Draketh ground forces. These humans had no chance against enemies with superior weapons and armor. But they kept fighting anyway, using tactics that confused their enemies and determination that could not be measured. Ye-Eun reached the Draketh command post and managed to transmit vital targeting data before she was killed. Her information allowed the remaining human forces to coordinate one final, desperate attack. Seung-ho Baek, a scientist who studied earthquakes, had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Using his knowledge of Earth's geology and a network of underground explosives, he triggered massive earthquakes under the two remaining Draketh ships. The ground itself became a weapon as the aliens struggled to maintain their position. Na-Young, who studied weather patterns, had been working with atmospheric control systems to create a storm unlike anything seen on Earth before. As the Draketh ships tried to stabilize themselves, they were hit by winds that could tear apart buildings and lightning strikes powerful enough to overload their systems. The humans were using their own planet as a weapon. They were willing to damage their world if it meant stopping the invaders. Veltar had never seen anything like it in all his years of studying different species. As the battle raged on, Veltar realized that his ship's communication equipment had been damaged in the fighting. He was receiving a distress call from Hyunwoo, who had been captured during a rescue mission to save civilians from a burning city. For Veltar, this was the moment when observation became action. He could no longer pretend to be a neutral scientist studying an interesting species. These were his friends, and they needed his help. Veltar's ship cut through the smoke and fire above the burning city, where Hyunwoo was being held prisoner. The Draketh had captured him during a rescue operation, and now they were using him to try to force the humans to surrender. Veltar knew that rescuing Hyunwoo would make him a target for both the Draketh and potentially his own people. But he no longer cared about such logical concerns. Using his ship's advanced stealth technology, Veltar penetrated the Draketh perimeter and landed near their temporary base. His rescue mission was successful, but it cost him his ship's cloaking device and most of its defensive systems. As they escaped, Hyunwoo looked at the alien scientist who had risked everything to save him. "Why did you do that?" Hyunwoo asked as they flew toward the human command center. "Because," Veltar said, surprising himself with his answer. You taught me that some things are more important than following orders or staying safe. The battle for Earth was reaching its climax. 2 Dracoth ships remained operational, but they were damaged and confused by human tactics they had never encountered before. The humans had lost millions of people and most of their major cities, but they had not given up. If anything, their losses had made them more determined to fight. Changmin No and Hyojin Kwan, 2 of Earth's best engineers, had been working on a desperate final plan. They had modified Veltar's observation equipment to create a massive electromagnetic pulse weapon. The device could potentially disable the remaining Dracoth ships, but using it would likely destroy Veltar's ship as well. "We cannot ask you to sacrifice your only way home," Changmin said to Veltar as they prepared the weapon. Veltar looked around at the humans working frantically to save their world. He thought about everything he had learned during his months of observation. These people had shown him that survival was not just about staying alive. It was about what you were willing to live and die for. "My home is no longer among the stars," Veltar said quietly. "It is here, with people who understand what truly matters." The electromagnetic pulse weapon fired just as the Dracoth ships were preparing their final assault on Earth's remaining population centers. The energy wave washed over the alien vessels, overloading their systems and shutting down their engines. The ships fell from the sky like dying birds, crashing into the oceans with tremendous force. But one ship remained partially operational. Warlord Kethmar, injured but still alive, managed to send out a distress signal to the Dracoth Empire before his communication systems failed completely. The signal would take years to reach Dracoth space, but when it did, they would learn that humans were not the easy prey they had expected. In the damaged Dracoth command ship, Kethmar could not understand what had happened. His forces had superior technology, greater numbers, and overwhelming firepower. How had these primitives defeated them? As Gitaeyu led the human boarding party that captured him, Kethmar demanded answers. "Your species should have surrendered," he said through a translator device. "Resistance was illogical. You could have lived as our servants instead of dying as warriors." Gitae smiled grimly. "You never understood us at all. We would rather die fighting for freedom than live as slaves. That is what makes us human." In the days that followed the battle, Earth began the long process of healing. The victory had come at a terrible cost. Entire cities had been destroyed, millions had died, and much of the planet's infrastructure was in ruins. But the humans began rebuilding immediately, working together as they always did when facing impossible challenges. Veltar found himself with a new role. Instead of studying humans as an outside observer, he became a bridge between Earth and the wider galaxy. He helped establish communication protocols with the Corvani Council, explaining how humanity had achieved the impossible. His reports to his own people were very different from the ones he had written months before. Instead of describing humans as primitive and illogical, he wrote about their incredible capacity for sacrifice, their ability to work together under pressure, and their refusal to accept defeat even when facing overwhelming odds. The humans did not win because of superior technology or military strategy, Veltar wrote. They won because they were fighting for each other, for their families, for their future, and for abstract concepts like freedom and justice. These motivations gave them strength that could not be calculated or predicted. 6 months after the battle, Veltar worked alongside So Young in a new research facility built from salvaged Dracoth technology. She was studying alien biological samples while he helped her understand their molecular structure. Their partnership represented something new: cooperation between species based on mutual respect rather than conquest or domination. Mi Young Shin, a philosopher who had survived the destruction of her city, often visited their laboratory. She was writing a book about the war and its meaning for humanity's future. "What do you think we learned from this experience?" she asked Veltar one day. Veltar considered the question carefully. "I think you learned that you are stronger than you believed. But I think I learned something more important, that strength is not just about power or technology. True strength comes from being willing to sacrifice for others, from refusing to give up hope, and from believing that some things are worth fighting for no matter what the cost." The Corvani Council was deeply disturbed by Veltar's reports. A primitive species had defeated the Dracoth, something that more advanced civilizations had failed to do. Some council members wanted to study the humans more closely, while others feared that human unpredictability made them dangerous. But Veltar had a different recommendation. In his final official report, he suggested that the Corvani Empire should seek alliance with humanity rather than dominance over them. "These humans have something we have lost," he wrote. "They remember that individuals matter, that sacrifice for others gives life meaning, and that hope can overcome any logical prediction of failure." As more Corvani scientists arrived to study Earth, they found themselves changed by contact with humanity just as Veltar had been. The humans welcomed them not as conquerors or masters, but as partners in exploring the universe. They shared their knowledge freely, offered friendship without conditions, and demonstrated daily that their victory over the Dracoth had not been a lucky accident. Veltar often stood in the rebuilt city where Hyunwoo and So Young continued their research. Watching humans go about their daily lives, they still did the same things that had puzzled him when he first arrived. They helped strangers. They sacrificed for their families. They worked toward goals they might never achieve, and they maintained hope even in the darkest times. But now he understood that these were not weaknesses to be corrected or primitive behaviors to be outgrown. They were the very qualities that made humanity special. The Dracoth had fallen not to superior weapons, but to superior spirit. In his personal journal, Veltar wrote, "I came to Earth to study a species I thought was inferior. Instead, I discovered teachers who showed me what it truly means to be alive. The humans did not just defeat my enemy. They defeated the limited thinking that made the Dracoth my enemy in the first place. They taught me that the greatest victory is not conquest, but the creation of a universe where different species can work together as friends. And in the stars above Earth, where human and alien ships now traveled together toward new discoveries, that lesson continued to spread throughout the galaxy.